Welcome to the Exploring Awareness podcast. Join Dr. Frank Anderson and Lisa Berry in exploring new ways to live in this chaotic world and find peace and joy in the most unlikely places.
Hello and welcome to the Exploring Awareness podcast. Whether this is your very first episode, we want to welcome you and appreciate you listening, or you've listened to several episodes and you can't wait to hear what we're talking about today. Either way, we're grateful that you're listening and appreciate you sharing this time and perspective with us. And by us, I'm Lisa Berry here with Dr. Frank Anderson. We've been exploring awareness for a while now.
Yes, and welcome to everybody, whether you're new or whether you're just starting. We have something going on here called Exploring Awareness. We also call it a big, fun journey.
Yes.
And we've been talking about awareness and mindfulness techniques. And we've had about, 59 episodes by now, starting at the beginning with how-tos. What is exploring awareness? Starting off with meditation techniques, and then talking about any number of topics as we went along through the COVID pandemic. We're still in the COVID pandemic, but it's been a big fun journey, and there's been challenges along the way and insights along the way. And if you listen to all the episodes, you can see all the things that Lisa Berry has gone through this last year.
Well, I was just thinking that I always say, I think there's a lesson in everything. If no matter what happens, whether it's good or bad, I think there's a lesson in that, including looking at things on whether they're good or bad. I think that I have learned that that's called dualistic thinking, and it's not encouraged in our world. And I'm just learning about it and catching myself at it. And are you familiar with dualistic thinking, or how does that impact your life and awareness?
Oh, absolutely. Dualistic thinking and dualism and non-dualism, these are conversations that people have in spiritual communities a lot. But on the surface and in everyday life, I think in the context of what we're talking about and exploring awareness, to be aware of that dynamic happening, is a way for us to know, to be conscious of how we're in the world. And one of the precepts we have for exploring awareness is when you become aware of what you're doing, then you can have a perspective on whether or not you really want to be doing that or not.
Ah, right. Do you think dualistic perspective or dualism or non-dualism, do you think that's a predominantly spiritual theory, or do you think it's something people talk about in general?
I don't want to get into the discussions of what dualistic spirituality is versus non-dualistic spirituality, other than to say that I tend to be more on a non-dualistic perspective.
I think I asked that question because it wasn't something that I was very aware of until I got into looking into spirituality more, or even psychology. Maybe it's a psychological term. I'm just wondering if you're sitting around the dinner table or having Thanksgiving with the family and someone starts talking about a dualistic perspective, if everybody at the table, literally and figuratively, really knows what you're talking about. Because I hadn't heard that much about it. And now I'm told when I think something is one way or the other, you're thinking dualistically, and that is not the right approach to take.
So, first of all, right or wrong is also
right.
We have a judgment episode recently, so this kind of fits into that. I guess let's get away from the word dualism and non-dualism right now, and let's just talk about how the world is seen. One way is like a black and white. Is your world divided up into this or that? Right? Is there this thing or that thing? So in the world, we have night and day, and we have black and white, and we have male and female, and we have hot and cold. And our world tends to get broken up into two things. it's either this way or it's that way. And non-dual would be more like something I learned in Thailand at that meditation retreat. And they say, just like that, just like it is. The Thai word they would say was tataha, tataha. I always had that feeling like, just like that. Boom, boom, boom. And it's like, so whatever it is in front of you, it is what it is. And now we have a tendency to want to put this in a box. So then you might want to say, well, that's good or that's bad. That would be, go back and listen to the judgment lecture about that. So if we're talking about, something that's dualistic, it means you're like categorizing things in ways that you've learned to categorize things. I mean, believe me, we all learned to do that. That's a big part of our culture. But then you explore the awareness of these things and you find out that it just isn't that straightforward. It isn't as clear as you'd like it to be. And these days, we're seeing beautiful, beautiful expressions of that.
What a great explanation. Thank you. Because for me, it's difficult to really grasp what that means. And I think that was a great way to describe it. And I think it's our natural tendency to want to have it be either or, because we want clarity. And so it's either good or it's bad, or it's hot or it's cold, or it's up or it's down. And if you don't look at life like that, I feel it gives you a little more freedom, that you can experience things along the way or as they are, or just like that, like you were saying, versus picking one and putting it in a box and looking at it in one certain specific way.
Right. And sometimes you have to have it that way for you to feel comfortable.
Right.
Right. So you have to have it this way. And if someone isn't doing it that way, then you don't feel comfortable. So it's like, well, whose problem is that? Is it their problem or is it your problem? And a lot of times we look at it as someone else's problem. You're not following my paradigm for good and bad, right or wrong, black and white, or what, you don't fit in my box, and that means you're wrong. Whereas someone else is just doing their own thing, right? They don't need to fit into your box either. Now, the cool thing about exploring awareness and the whole spiritual aspect of this is, and we've had episodes on unity before, but at the deepest realization that we can experience through spiritual work is the unity of all beings, and the unity and oneness, right? And it's a deep realization that is part of the path of this work, right? And so if you do have that realization, it doesn't mean you don't have to not be dual or non-dual. You just be yourself, and that's it. And there's no judgment, and there's no separation. But that's a tall order. And right now we're all on this big fun journey, which means sometimes the fun means the challenges that we face and overcome, and we've had any number of those that we've talked about. But again, sometimes facing this issue is very difficult. Some of these boxes are so deeply embedded. And you've heard the term unconscious bias, right?
Right.
You've worked with that, haven't you, Sam? On your
absolutely. It's in the pandemic. It's in the environment. There are so many places that it shows up.
Yeah. How do you understand unconscious bias?
Like you don't even realize what you're thinking. You don't even become aware of where you're coming from or what you might be thinking or expecting.
And bias assumes duality, doesn't it? Assumes you're biased this way or
right.
That way.
Right.
And when you're unconsciously biased, you don't know that you're biased, right?
Right.
And so we're inviting this with exploring awareness. I think it really is at the root of unconscious bias training and understanding, because there's a certain brain level of understanding you might have, But really, unless you can feel it deep within and like, oh my gosh, I've been unconsciously biased. Sometimes it hurts to realize that. You don't want to see that in yourself, then that's when the self-compassion comes in, which is also built into the exploring awareness practice, right?
Right.
So we're talking about at the root level how to deal with some of this unconscious bias.
You said so much. I feel like I'm in school. I feel like, wow, that was really powerful and something that you don't really think about, but I feel like I just learned a whole bunch of things. And it was funny because you started explaining it and I thought, oh, I want to be like you when I grow up. Look how wise you are and all these great things you know. And then you went on to say, well, it's about being your authentic self. And I thought, okay, well, then I'm back to being me again. I just have to learn and apply what you're saying to myself. And
well, let's take a look at that too, because we're talking right now and there's a certain level of kind of mental stuff we can learn from this. Mm-hmm. But really, when we do the meditation too, it's really when you explore awareness and you begin to identify as awareness, then you're not thinking it, you're doing it, you're
right.
being it.
Right.
It's coming out of you naturally. It's not something you have to force yourself to do.
And would you say that awareness, we talk about a lot of different aspects of awareness, but awareness in itself is non-dualistic?
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Yeah. See, can we say that again? I think that's really important. Here we talk about awareness episode after episode. And when you break it down, and there are a lot of different ways to look at it, but it's non-dualistic because it's so open and unopinionated.
Right. It's non-dual awareness.
Mm-hmm.
You could have dual awareness if you're kind of aware that it is kind of that more the mental awareness. Like, oh, I wasn't aware that I was speeding. That's more of a dual awareness. I'm aware that I'm eating. If it's at that level, it's kind of like, well, all right. It's not the same as this kind of deep knowing awareness and awareness of awareness that what this podcast is all about, and what happens when you start to identify as awareness. And so in all the different episodes, we're ultimately talking about the same thing. Yet there's all these different conditions of life that we can become aware of, but they're going to all take us to the same place. So this particular condition of life we're talking about is this tendency for the dualistic thinking, right? And so bringing that to awareness transforms those thoughts and judgments into presence.
I think I have had a lot of experiences where I get caught in dualistic thinking, and I wasn't even aware of it like 6 months ago. And now I've learned about it, and I have learned that it's a natural state for us to be in, that we go in and out of it. But I think awareness is such a key element to that can help you with it when you realize awareness is non-dualistic. So if you make an effort to be aware of your awareness or look at life with awareness, then that would help you not look at it dualistically. Does that make any sense at all? I think it's because I've had such an issue with it. For me, it's an ordeal. It gets pointed out to me frequently that, oh, you're being dualistic again. You're expecting life to be either good or bad, or you are good or you are bad. And it's not that way. That's not the way to look at it. So I like that we can apply awareness to not be in that space.
Yeah, well, we apply awareness to transform that space because awareness is non-dual, right? And so that, and again, it does take an effort to recognize that you're doing that. And the interesting thing is, we talk about practicing meditation on a regular basis. Right. And so when you occupy that non-dual space, right, and you're practicing at home, then when you move out into the day, that awareness is much more accessible, right? And so then the response comes instead of the reaction, right? And so again, that's another theme that we have. And so if you're in situations where you tend to be dualistic, you can be aware of it if you've been practicing awareness, in other settings.
You always have to search for what we're talking about so I can try to add to the conversation. And I found this, that the dualistic mind is essentially binary, either or thinking. And I don't know why I do that, but I guess I do it a lot. It knows by comparison, opposition, and differentiation. It uses descriptive words like good and evil, or pretty, ugly, smart, stupid, not realizing that there may be 100 degrees between the two ends of each spectrum. And I love to think about that, because to me, that gives you freedom and openness and consideration. And if I encounter something and I make a judgment, I know this is not about judgment. We talked about judgment recently, but it is a judgment if I'm quantifying it and from either end, either good or bad, or evil or pretty or ugly. It's like I'm not giving myself that freedom to fully be aware of whatever it is I'm looking at or talking about or experiencing.
Oh, exactly. I mean, ideas of beauty are all culturally created.
Right.
And there's a lot of things culturally created too. I think that gender is one. Right. And, I'm an OBGYN, and I'm very aware of how gender happens. Now, in many cases, you think, well, a male is a male and acts like this, and a woman is a woman and acts like that. That's a common cultural thing. But it turns out that that's not the case at all. There's people who have all types of expression, and we all have a mix of masculine and feminine with us. And people live lives in different ways, right? And if it doesn't fit into our category, is that really, whose problem is that? Is it the person who's not fitting into your category's problem, or is it your problem, right? So, but I think if we are putting ourselves in boxes and we expect everyone else to be in either this box or that box, if you don't fit into that, it becomes disturbing to the person that's in the box, right? I'm at Florida International University now, and they have a Center for Humanities in the Urban Environment group, and they had a talk last night where they had 3 transgender people talking about their experiences, right? And people that are transgender are just kind of want to live their lives. And then other people who want them to be in boxes are the ones that have the problem with it. And that creates problems for the transgender person. So the real question is, can you become aware of discomfort or where that's coming from? You find the roots of your discomfort through awareness, by exploring or having that perspective or that curiosity. It's like, why is it bothering me that someone is transgender? Or why is it bothering me that they'd rather have they're male and want a male partner, or female and want a female partner? Why is that? What is it that bothers me about that? There may not be in the boxes that I've created or that I live in, and the boxes that you're comfortable in, right? So everyone's comfortable in their own different reality. So what a relief it is to quit worrying about everyone and having them, make your life miserable.
Right.
You have to, because they're just living their own authentic lives, right? So it's a perspective shift. Now, it may go against people's religious beliefs, and may go against people's, cultural beliefs. But to me, religious beliefs are based on, come out of a loving expression, right? Accepting. So, I mean, again, sometimes people have to explore deeper where these things are coming from and how they're going to resolve that.
I've actually had a couple of experiences like that lately, where I've been exposed to someone or something, and I'm start judging them and thinking, well, that's weird or right or wrong. And then I've been aware that I was doing that. So I gave myself the space and time to think, now, wait a minute. Like you said, if something happens, that's my problem, not their problem. I'm thinking that's my problem. It's not their problem. And I think maybe that's that sort of instant awareness you keep telling us about every week, that more that you do the practices or use the tools or do the meditation, it comes more naturally to you. So I'll find myself in these situations and then I'll think, why am I thinking that? And become aware of my dualistic perceptions or my judgment, and then just give it some space and realize, yeah, be your authentic self. Who am I to put anybody in a box? I'm hurting myself, not them. They're just being their authentic self, and I'm all for that. So to be aware of that and be able to make that transition, I think really, I find that very helpful.
No, I think so too. And I mean, it is the way to peace. I mean,
way to peace.
You start talking about now race, right? And so now we have another deeply embedded kind of cultural and historical divide, right? That biologically means nothing. So people also say race is a social construct, right? I mean, what does the color of skin have to do with anything? And so it's just all these things that culture adds onto that, right? And assumes, and where did that come from? And this is the present moment. You know, there's someone with you at the present moment, or a situation at the present moment. To be present to what is what we're talking about right now. And so if you're putting people in boxes because of culture and history, and in terms of race, it's like a tragic history for African Americans of enslavement and violence and all of these, the history that creates these unconscious biases. And so the unconscious bias training that people go to kind of starts to expose them to the things that are contributing to unconscious bias. But I would love to see more exploring awareness training in those workshops so that you can get to the root of it all, the root of all bias, of all unconsciousness, whatever that might be.
Well, you're an academic, and so you have these opportunities to have these conversations and get this exposure. So I think for me, this is what this podcast is about, that we can actually share that as well in this form and break it down to awareness and what we can learn from that. And like you said, it's the road to peace. I'm like on this big, I just want to be at peace thing lately. So if this helps you feel peace and ease and understanding, hopefully that's what we're all sort of looking for, working towards.
There are other roads to peace, but this is the road to peace that we're talking about.
Right.
And the road to peace starts with you becoming peaceful. And now, that doesn't matter what race you are, what gender you are, or anything. I mean, okay, now we're talking about the road to peace. And so a peaceful person makes a peaceful family, and a peaceful family makes a peaceful neighborhood, and so on and so on. So now we've all got a responsibility to not force ourselves to be peaceful. We actually have an opportunity to discover this inner resource that actually is already peaceful underneath all of this stuff that we're talking about. I've got a good quote here for that.
You hear the phrase, don't box me in, or don't put me in a box. Do you think that applies to dualistic thinking?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. That's other people trying. But now here is a Zen saying that I agree with, but there's no author. It says, you are that which is beyond belief, which is beyond thought, which is beyond emotion, which is beyond sensation, which is beyond perception, which is beyond all experience, and which is beyond the mind itself. You are a presence of awakened, non-dual awareness, undivided by any mental formation. Just be impersonally unconditioned and free. So you are that which is beyond all of those other things.
And my response was going to be, wee, you're just,
yeah.
wee, big fun journey. Yeah, let it all go and don't try to juggle it back and forth. And that's awesome.
And this is not pie in the sky. And this is
no, it's not.
New age. It's not. It's just you have an opportunity to be completely free. And once you experience these things, you're going to find you haven't really lost much, but you've gained a tremendous amount.
Why do people, and I do feel like this is a dualistic reaction. Some people, when you try to express this to them, they act like you're threatening them. Their response is like, they're afraid almost to embrace living that way. And like you're saying, you have nothing to lose and everything to gain. It's not a dogma. There's no beliefs. There's no money involved. We're not trying to brainwash you. It's just freedom and peace and joy. And why do people seem so threatened by it?
Because you lose what you think is your identity.
Oh.
You're right. You think that you are X, Y, and Z, and you are that today partly, but you also are the awareness of that. All those things you have are impermanent. Your body today is impermanent. Your thoughts, your brain is impermanent. There's no permanence in anything, right? But you think there is. You think that you are your personality, but your personality was actually formed by all your experiences, right? It's all based on conditions and in the future as well. Eventually your mind is going to go. Eventually you're going to go. So there's nothing permanent. However, connecting to something deeper within you is timeless. Who were you before you were born and after you die, right? Who are you? Who are you really? So it's hard to lose that kind of thing. It's like, well, I've grown up this way and I've always thought this way. And if I don't, how can you stop thinking this way? It's very hard. It's very hard. That's why I do this work as soon as you can, because the older you get, the more fixed your beliefs are, and then the more crotchety and grumpy you get too.
Crusty. I keep hearing the word crusty. A lot of people are describing themselves or others as crusty.
Yeah. So if you know you're crusty, you're aware, but you just don't know it, right? So knowing that you're crusty is awareness. But if you're crusty and you don't know it, then you're just insufferable. And so you can get your crusty old uncle to listen to this podcast, but it may be too threatening, and crusty old uncle's going to say this is a bunch of new age poppycock.
Well, I've had that conversation with someone who's like open and interested, and then I try to talk and share more, and they're almost like recoiling a little bit, like they're afraid. They're afraid. They hear it and they want to hear it and they want this to be their life, but they're afraid. And I want to say, what are you afraid of? Like you're saying, all you have to gain is peace and joy and connecting to your authentic self. Don't be afraid.
Well, people have to come to this voluntarily.
Right? Absolutely. I know that.
People come to this work sometimes because there's just no other option. Things have gotten so bad. It's like, well, they get to the bottom, the dark night of the soul. This is the only way out. Other people get interested in it. Other people are kind of, why would I do that? And I've heard that before. Why would I ever do what we just said we're doing? I mean, I'm happy, I'm successful, and things are going fine. So why would I do this? Why would I risk losing the spice of life?
For me, I've seen how life can change in an instant, and I've learned how precious it is. And I really do think our bodies are miracles. And so the more I look at life that way, the more interested I am in exploring more and talking about awareness and going deeper and all the different things that it applies to. So,
and you don't lose the spice of life. You gain like a
right.
wonder and joy and
Yes.
peace. So,
and awe. Don't forget awe.
Awe, and open-heartedness and open-mindedness and all of those things. Listen up, people. We got lots of content, new content every week. But ultimately, we can talk about this a lot, and we do every time. And then we also always transition to the non-talking experiential part where really the work happens,
right?
Where the realizations can happen, where the experiential nature of awareness can happen, right? Because now we're moving into exploring awareness and starting first off by being aware of the breath, because that's an easy way to start. And if you're aware that you're breathing, and then aware that you're of your body, and aware that you're thinking, and aware of your emotions, then that space of awareness starts to open up. So again, I just talked about it, and maybe you can start to feel it a little bit. But now just let's move into the guided meditation and just close your eyes and sit in your chair or comfortable position with your feet on the floor and your hands in your lap. We've been talking today about awareness of being in a box, or putting other people in a box. And so let's have our intention of this meditation to be open to other kind of realities that these things point to. It's not either this way or that way. It's something else. What is that? And so if we can be open to what is the alternative to this and that, black and white thinking. And we'll do that first by just focusing in on the breath. We're not going to think our way through this. We're going to feel it. But to feel it, we have to open up our awareness. And we'll start by being aware of the breath as it goes in and out of the body. So now your mind is focused on the breathing. And you feel the air. And instead of breathing unconsciously, now you're breathing consciously. Remember that. The difference between breathing consciously, as we're doing now, compared to what we were doing a couple of minutes ago, talking, breathing, and not knowing that we're breathing. It's a subtle difference, but very important. And so you have to train yourself to be aware of the breath. It takes a while because a lot of people have so many thoughts, and thoughts have been racing perhaps all day or for years, or you can't imagine what would it be like. So for a second, you can be aware of your breath, and then the thoughts rush in. And so For now, just when you have a thought or a bunch of thoughts, just go back to the breath. And if you have thoughts, you're not doing this wrong. When you become aware of your thoughts, you're doing it right. You're going back to the breath. And so even in meditation, there's not a right or wrong. So if you're creating that for yourself, you're already showing duality so you can be aware of it. And the same with the body. So sometimes you're sitting and your body starts to hurt in a place, right? You maybe change positions, it still hurts. Just bring awareness to the area of pain or areas of tightness. Sometimes just being aware of those spaces just relaxes, shifts your body. It returns it more to a normal state. You become aware of your shoulders and they relax when you become aware of them. It's like, oh, I didn't know that I wasn't aware that my body was tight. I was tightening my body unconsciously. So then you bring awareness and it returns to its peaceful state. And so then same with thoughts. You have racing thoughts and you become aware of them and they tend to dissolve and just your mind can return to the peaceful state. Right? So now though, let us think about somehow we have a dualistic thought. How is it? What boxes do you absolutely have to have? Right now, is it a race? Is it a gender? Is it a political party? Is it a hairstyle? Is it a weight? What are your categories? And which one is good? Which one is bad? What makes this one so good and this one so bad? And just let the thoughts go in, but as they're coming in, you're aware of them. So you're investigating. When did you come up with this conclusion? Who taught you this conclusion? Who taught them? Why did they teach them that? Is there a fear involved? Why are you afraid? So allow those thoughts to come and you be aware of them. And this is where you kind of gain insight. And sometimes this is called insight meditation. And sometimes you want to push the thoughts away, right? You can become aware that you're resisting. Right? And that's okay too. But just creating a place where the thoughts are conscious, just like the body, just like the breath. And so what does it mean to be conscious of your thoughts? And so now, let's move into this place of being conscious so that whatever is happening in the present moment, thoughts, breath, body, is happening in the field of your awareness. You can imagine all of this happening on a stage and you're in the audience. You're aware of all these things. But the awareness has a certain quality to it. It has immediacy of the present moment. It's not a thought of the past or the future. It's just present. It has a sense of equanimity or peace or just a chill acceptance. Right? And sometimes there's a sense of like, you might feel sleepy because sometimes your body starts to relax so much because of the peace. But there's also can be a sense of joy at knowing that there's something more than all of these thoughts, judgments, and emotions. So it's like the joy that doesn't have an opposite, the joy that is beyond thoughts. So you identify with all of these parts of you, right? And then with this sense about you, you can move in the world in a generous, loving way, in a way that other people can feel it and notice it. You make the world a more peaceful place. But then the doubts come in your brain, or your to-do list pops up in your head. Fine. Just go back to the breath. Aware of the breath. Aware of the body. Aware of all the thoughts that are coming about putting people in boxes, and all the other thoughts too about everything else. In this meditation, we're just connecting to this sense of deep awareness that's always there and is the unending source of peace and love and joy and generosity. That is always, always there. Might be deeply covered, but it's always there. So we'll just keep practicing awareness and being open to that possibility. And so we'll end now if you want. Hit pause and meditate some more. But now we'll take a couple of deep breaths. And we'll open our eyes. And let's see, Lisa, do you have a crotchety old uncle you want to play this for?
I have a couple of crusty doctors. Maybe they might want to.
Crusty doctors.
Long story. That was such a peaceful meditation. I don't even feel like I shouldn't even talk. It was like, wow, that was great.
I know. I kind of wanted to keep meditating, but
yeah,
we'll run out of tape.
Right. Right. And I wasn't dualistic because I wasn't awake or asleep. I was somewhere in between.
You go.
Exploring the in-between of that. So thank you. Thank you for the many wise things that you said on this episode and the perspective you share. I know I learned a lot. I hope people listening did.
And I hope that the meditation is helpful. And it's important to practice this. It's easy to get lost in thought.
Right.
Normal. And the purpose of this is not for you to not get lost in thought, but the purpose for you is to move around in the day present.
Right.
When you're present, you don't get lost in thought. So again, this is never not getting rid of anything. It's just being present to everything. And when you're present to everything, there is a shift. So please try it. And please get your friends to try it. And I hope that this approach is accessible to people. And so please share your podcast favorite episodes with your friends as well.
And know that we're extremely grateful that you're listening. And if you want to email us, exploringawareness@gmail.com is our email address. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. So we'd love to hear from you. But most of all, just very grateful that you're listening to our podcast.
We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, have a peaceful week.
This podcast is not an attempt to practice medicine or provide specific medical advice, nor does use of this information establish a physician-patient relationship. Listening to this podcast does not replace medical consultation with a qualified health or medical professional to meet the health and medical needs of you or others. If you are having problems, please see your primary care provider or your local mental health professional.